It's wonderful to be back for our second installment. Obviously, as I mentioned last week, we have a little custom here at Aggie Chabad. Whenever we're going to learn Torah, we start and we get by giving tzedakah. Since obviously learning Torah benefits us tremendously, we always want to stop and think of others at moments like this. So I have my tzedakah box right here, and I have my coins. I always keep them handy, and obviously we should all keep in mind a refuah shalema for Paralea Bas Sarah Esther, and obviously amongst all Chalei Am Yisrael, but in our own community, we always want to be very conscious and aware of those who are struggling, and may our collective learning with all the amazing women on here, and God willing, the strength and power of what the learning accomplishes. It's a very powerful thing, and there's no, we can't underestimate that. And God willing, it should bring around a complete refuah shlema, and only B'ser Tevis, not just for Paralea, but to all of those who are.
Okay, I want to go get the card from the other house.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna just, if some people jump in, I'm gonna try to keep people muted, not because I don't love hearing from people. At the end, I'm really gonna carve out time for discussion, but I'm a little bit like ADD, I guess. I don't know. It's just a little bit distracting, and I also want everyone to be able to hear. And then we can move forward. So what I'd like to do tonight is I would really, really, really love to start with a recap, a brief recap. So if there is someone who's on here who is not on here before, feel free to, everyone feel free to, we'll keep it concise as can be, but all of us have an opportunity to just catch up. And I do find that within a whole week, a lot of time goes by, and a lot of, in one day, there's a lot on our mind, let alone a week. So a brief recap, a 2-minute recap at the beginning of each class, which kind of summarizes the class before, is my style. And I hope that this is helpful to everyone. The other thing I did is I dropped in the chat the handout that I know Mrs. Goldstein sent out earlier. You don't have to use the handout. It's just giving you a space. Some people like to write, some people don't like to write, some people like text, some people don't like text. It is 8 p.m. on a Monday night. I am not holding anyone to the standard of text-based learning, though it is delicious to sink your teeth into text. I certainly understand for many of us, the fact that we even made it on is already like bravo. Another thing is, and I definitely said this last week, so I'm just going to say it again, for those of you who can and are comfortable showing your beautiful faces, please do. It is absolutely way, 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 way easier teaching to faces than teaching to a little black box. Just a fact. Like, this is not easy for anyone to look and listen to me. For me, it's not about the material that I have, it's the people I'm teaching. And it's, and then I get to see if like someone fell asleep, if people are confused, if they couldn't hear me. Like I just get to, it helps me pace myself and understand where it's holding. So if you can give me a blessing, I don't care about the noise and the kids in the background, the tickle on your head, the pajamas you're in. I'll be happy for you if you're tucked into bed in pajamas. I'll be a little jealous, but I'll be happy. So I hope everyone has a nice big glass of something. This is an opportunity as women to sit together. It could be rosé, it can be a nice Cabernet, it could be a nice cup of tea, whatever works for you. Grab a nice beverage, try to make yourself cozy. There you go. Someone else has a nice big glass there, and jump in to spend this time together, which I really thoroughly enjoyed last class. So moving along, and thank you for those who showing you beautiful faces. I really do appreciate it. And maybe next week I'll show up in a tickle and then everyone will feel comfortable. Like, they'll just be like, oh, she's wearing a tickle. I could totally I'll come in a tickle and pajamas. Then it will like even the playing field and everyone will feel fine. Okay. So what I want to do briefly, like I said, is a very quick recap. Now, obviously we said Tanya was like this first, you took about the section of self-help books. Tanya's like the original book of self-help for us as human beings. And what happens is when I get into a subject, I will wake up at 4 a.m. and run to the bathroom. But then what crosses my mind is like the class or an idea or a line. And in middle of one of my 5 a.m. epiphanies, so it happens sometimes. I do go back to sleep, so don't worry. But in one of my 5 a.m. epiphanies, I had this thought. On the one hand, with Tanya, you go so deeply into yourself, into who I am, into my soul, my psyche, what makes me me. How do I function? What are my struggles? Like, I wanted to go so deeply into ourselves, but it's actually all about getting beyond ourselves. And so that, to me, that paradox was like okay, fine, it was a 5 a.m. epiphany, but really what it was a mind-blowing realization that really to get beyond ourselves, we have to get into it. We got to know where we're at. And it is a journey, because Tanya is an absolute journey, and which is why I think I'm so passionate about it. And really it helps us understand ourselves in the spectrum with the world, within our own being. And it really gives us such practical strategies and guidance to deal with guilt and shame and joy and purpose in this world, like really, really big stuff that everyone needs, right? We all need to learn how to handle guilt and shame and frustration and aggravation and how to navigate the nature that Hashem gave us, right? And so last week we talked briefly about the idea that this novel, incredible concept that Chassidus introduces about the two souls. And it's based on a quote in Koheles, talks about Hashem made human beings with two souls. And within that, we talked about the animal soul, which is the primary soul. And we talked about the godly soul, which is the secondary soul. We said it settles in secondary. It settles in phases by bar bat mitzvah. It's like, it's here to stay. And what they are each kind of made up of, and what they really, their driving energy is. And I got a really good question at the end of class. So feel free at the end of class or afterwards, WhatsApp me. I got a really good question. Are there actually two souls? So first of all, I really went back to the Tanya, and it's very clear that the Alter Rebbe quotes multiple times and multiple locations that there are two neshamas. But I realized the issue isn't how many souls there are. The issue is the way we look at souls, right? Because we are very literal. So if you tell me there's like two souls, I'm like seeing like one and like two. Like we see a thing, we see an item. Like we're very like, everything is like tangible, quantifiable, and souls are anything but that, right? It's so for us as human beings, it's not simple for us to understand this idea, but they're rooted in different energies and they have a different function within us, within you and I as human beings. And we said that, and I'm going to kind of glaze through the ideas that we did last class because, you know, it was recorded, and if anyone needs it, feel free to like take a deeper dive into that whole hour. But we did say that what is the soul made up of? Okay, great. So I know I have an animal soul, which is selfish and worried about itself and self-preservation and everything related to this world. And then there's this godly soul, which is transcendent and selfless and anything related to spirituality and things above and beyond. And obviously we know it doesn't go so well with the friction between the two of them. We'll talk about that extensively tonight and how that plays out and what are some tools that the Alter Rebbe is giving us to navigate that reality, right? But we said that they're really made up of 10 sefirot, 10 divine building blocks of everything in the world. And 3 are intellectual and 7 are emotive. And so 3 intellectual means, what do I think? And what do I feel about what I think? What's going to drive action? So I have a thought that crosses my mind, but what am I going to do about that thought? How do I feel about that thought? How do I process the thought? Where do I go with that thought? And we said that that's really what's inside of us. And both the animal soul and the godly soul have both of those, because Hashem created a world with balance. And so it wouldn't be fair just to give the animal soul those and not the godly soul, right? It's got to be balance. And so that's the inside, is the two neshamas with the nefesh of Bahamas, the animal soul, the primal soul, and the nefesh of Elokis, the godly soul. And we said that the building blocks of the soul are the 10 spheres. And that being said, that's the inside. And then comes how it expresses itself. Now, a soul cannot just, express itself. A soul has garments. And why garments? Because a garment you can choose to put on, you can take off, you can change, you can get into pajamas, you can work in sweatpants, you're going out to a business meeting, you're going to an appointment, you want to look like a put together person, you don't really care, it's your friends, and you'll whatever, the clothes has a little whatever, it doesn't matter, right? So souls a garment tells a story. Our garments that we put on that help our soul tell its story are thought, speech, and action. And we said very, very clearly that obviously speech, there's only one word that can come out of my mouth at once. Even if I have multiple words that want to come out, there's only one that can come out at once. I can only say one word or saying at a time. It can't pile up. They can come out in very quick succession, but they cannot come out at the same time. And then what we went on to explain is obviously action. Now, you're expressing yourself through action. And when, even if there's going to be two conflicting actions at the same moment, right? Even if, let's say that's a case, and I think as when many of us can relate to that, where like you, let's say, start to lose your cool, but then you realize like that's not the best idea for life and for your children and for your home or for your family, for your shalom bayis, or for anything or anyone. You kind of quickly rein that in, right? You still can only do one thing at a time. Even if you quickly, have really great self-mastery, wonderful self-control, and you quickly shift gears, at the end of the day, at any given moment, it's one action at a time. And we talked more examples last class. And then comes thought. And the garment of thought is really, really it's kind of more inquisitive. Like we just have, it's like more like, wait, what's the deal with that? Like that thought, I'm my animal soul or my godly soul are choosing that. And we just actually had this discussion on Shabbos morning. We were sitting on the couch, and I'm not even sure how we got into it. We're talking about the thoughts. And I said, this is, and I explained to one of my children, this is exactly what the Alter Rebbe was referring to as the garment of thought. You see, the garment of thought is not that flash of a moment. You walk in the kitchen and all the milk was left on the counter overnight and it's all spoiled. And that first thought that crosses your mind, probably not the most cute, pleasant, loving, warm, fuzzy thought, right? You're like a little bit like, whatever, who did it, why, where, how, I told them, they don't listen, they never listen, whatever. And this may not happen in your houses. It once or twice has happened here, similar stories, right? So if you don't relate, cool. If you do, we're in solidarity, okay? But point being that you have these thoughts that cross your mind, and you may even think, oh, I'm gonna kill that child, that person, that whatever. Now, you don't actually mean it, hopefully not. Or the other negative thoughts that flash through your mind. That second that thought flashes through your mind, that's not a garment. It's a fleeting thought, in, out. When you choose to harbor, to focus, to think, to dwell, to allow it to grow feet and legs, and you already start digging up all the other times they didn't listen and the other things that got spoiled and this would have happened, that's when you're putting on the garment. So it's not like window shopping, like, oh, that would be a pretty dress. It's like putting on the dress, right? And so truth is that when we choose, and actually that's what happened, is we got into a conversation of the choices we make to allow our thinking to head in a certain direction. And that's a garment. And that at any given moment, those three are expressing either the animal soul or the godly soul. Okay. Now, moving forward, we actually discussed briefly, I think this is kind of where we were up to from last class. But when we move forward in the Tanya, and just for those who are not there, this is not an in-depth Tanya class. There's so much that's missing. This is really like a drone flying over, getting an aerial view of like some big ideas that are meaningful and enriching and practical. And I think like perfect for a Monday night at 8 p.m. Like if it's like a Tuesday and it's 9 a.m. and all the kids are in school, or you're like calm and like things at the office are good and you have like time to just open the Tanya, like really dig deep, like go for it. But like if it's 8 p.m. and we're just grabbing some quick thoughts and hopefully some quick takeaways, this is hopefully that kind of, class and those kinds of ideas. So where is it that these neshamas get their life source? And so here's something so interesting. And the Tanya and the Alter Rebbe go into kind of dividing where the energy comes from. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the Nefesh Bahamas gets energy from Klipas Nega, right? What's Klipas Nega? Klipas Nega, meaning it's in Klipas Nega, the concept of Klipas Nega is in a really powerful, empowering Hasidic concept. What Klipas Nega is it's saying neutral levels of non-holiness. And at any given moment, your animal soul can truly express itself with non-holiness. So let's say, look at this, obviously. And this is why this concept was so novel and so earth-shattering that as Hasidim, we're really lucky that this is one of our approaches to look at the mundane world and life, and looking at the life source of everything that can seem mundane. So we could say, okay, like money is good or bad, a knife is good or bad. We all know the answer, right? A knife is not bad. Well, a knife can be bad and a knife can be good, right? Fire can be wonderful. Fire can be really, really damaging and toxic. So what we learn through this concept in Klipas Nega that really we're introduced to is that everything, even this wonderful glass of tea, can be used for good. So I can right now use this with intentionality and mindfulness to teach, to share, to learn, to hydrate my throat, to make a beautiful bracha on, and make sure the tea leaves are kosher. And wow, I have just elevated materialism to a very powerful level. That is the energy of Klipas Nega, meaning that it's neutral. And really the empowerment comes from what you and I do with that energy. What do we do? So sometimes we like to label that animal soul, oh gosh, that animal soul. And I told you ladies last week, I had a lady in my class who was so insulted for her poor puppy that the animal soul. And I'm like, no, we need the animal soul. If it was just up to the godly soul, you and I wouldn't be here. The godly soul, peace out. I want nothing to do with this world. Have fun. There's God, there's Atzilus, there's awesome stuff. No thanks, right? The animal soul is what keeps us, sustains us, anchors us, keeps us safe and alive. And so, but the animal soul, we all know, can cause a little bit of problems, a little bit of trouble along the way as it tries to help us, take care of ourselves because, well, I don't have to tell you, we all know what that can look like sometimes when we're trying to protect ourselves too much, right? Someone looks at us the wrong way, we're insulted, our child says something, we take it personally, we're trying to protect ourselves. So, but it's really the new level of neutrality that we can choose how we approach and how that energy is used. What's absolutely fascinating is then the Alter goes on to describe how Rava actually used wine, savory wine and meat and jokes to share, to learn, to open people's hearts to be receptive to Torah, to be receptive to share ideas. So I wish I could deliver nice wine and meats at your door. We're a little bit limited here in College Station right now. We haven't had an order in a while. But anyone who comes, I will take care of them. You're more than welcome. But point is that really this teaches us that yes, a steak is not bad. It should be a kosher steak. It should be from, it should be, share it with others, make a bracha, make sure it's cooked properly, all of these different things, and then use the energy for good. And that is something that's really powerful. And then we're introduced to the Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis. And Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis are 3 levels of non-holiness, meaning bottom line is you and I, it's not our job to elevate. I once got asked by a student, this concept of materialism and using it to elevate and godly divine sparks, how cool. And they're like, so I could eat a cheeseburger and elevate it. I'm like, not really. Nice try, no can do. No, but the energy, not your job.
Yeah.
You do not have to elevate the godly energy.
Yes.
The pig. Not your job, not your responsibility. And actually, it's very clear. Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis are things like Lashon Hara. It is not your job to elevate the world by telling Lashon Hara. That is just not the way to do it. Right? Things like treif. And what does Chassidus explain about the Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis? Meaning they're untouchable. They get their energy from the other side, not in a direct way. And ultimately, what is it? So it's really kind of discussing that the godly divine energy, let's say within that cheeseburger, is asur. It doesn't mean it's not allowed. It's bound. It's not ours. And that which is allowed, like Rava eating that steak and that meat, is mutar. It's unbound. And every morning, interestingly enough, what is one of the morning brachas? We say matir asurim. So we know there's a little translation. Okay, matir asurim, thanking Hashem for the, allowing us to be unbound, whether we wake up in the morning, we can move. It's a bracha. Someone could say when they come out of prison, if anyone happens, whatever. If I teach at the federal prison, so I actually we helped someone make the bracha. Yeah, true story. We have a local federal women's prison. I never thought I'd teach Tanya behind bars, but you know what? It's a very receptive audience. True story. Really open to learning. So that's cool. Anyway, but point being that aside from the literal translation of the bracha, what that bracha is also telling us is actually an allusion to the reminder that there are times in life that we maybe engage in things, behaviors. I don't know, maybe once you spoke Lashon Hara and that wasn't allowed and you were not meant to elevate the godly spark of speech or energy in that time. It may have happened once, right? But through tshuva, through changing our behavior, we actually release that which is unbound, meaning the bound up energy, divine energy in that thing that was impermissible, not allowed. So I have not eaten lobster ever in my life. I cannot, through the process of tshuva, release the energy that was bound up in that lobster. But a Baal Tshuva can, which is why we know a place that a Baal Tshuva stands, and we're all hopefully a Baal Tshuva to some degree. We've all hopefully taken a look inward and said, like, well, that I can kind of go beyond and try to do without, and that behavior I can probably alter, and maybe I can start to, do this a little bit more. But what we do is when we elevate, that's the only way we can elevate that which is bound up. But we don't eat the cheeseburger to do tshuva. We all know that, right? That trick doesn't work, right? I'm going to eat the lobster, then I'll do tshuva, and then, wow, I'm going to release that. No, that's not it. But it's a really powerful bracha in the morning that we're saying that these energy that is that is stuck, trapped from the shalosh klipas hatmeis, it's not our job to undo. However, through the process of tshuva, at the right time, and obviously we're talking about sincere tshuva, et cetera, we have the power to alter things. So now that we understand there is my two souls, and they're made up of the 10 sefirot, and they express themselves through machshava, dibur, and maisa. Those are the garments. And we understand even where they kind of get their energy from and what type of energy they fuel. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to be like, okay, now it's time to get to work. Now it's time to, now that we got the anatomy out of the way, we've got year one of med school where we know all the phrases and we know all the terms and we know where this situation's happening. Now we actually have to dig deep. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to give us these incredible tools. And hopefully at the end of each class, and you may have noticed the handout, it's in the chat and I know it was sent out. At the end of each class, I put this section called Big Idea and Takeaway. And I find that if there's any part of the handout you do, it's a really powerful moment that at the end of the class, say, what's a big idea I gained from this class? And what's a practical takeaway? Because anyone who knows me, I really am all about practicality. I don't have time for fluff. It's got to be really practical and it's got to draw me in. I will absolutely repost it in the chat. Yes, I'll do it towards the end if that's okay. So what is it now that we understand this about ourselves, we can get to work. What's really, really important to understand is the Nefesh Bahamas is not out to get us. It's not out to hold us back. It's not out to trap us. As a matter of fact, there's a fascinating mashal given in Tanya that the Nefesh Bahamas actually wants us not to succeed. It doesn't want to be victorious. And it describes even how there's a king and he's trying to test the character of his son. Will his son be a good ruler? And he hires a harlot who is meant to trap the prince. Now, the harlot herself is not interested in succeeding. She wants the prince to override. And within us, our neshama is that precious prince. And we're struggled. We have challenges. But the Nefesh Bahamas is not looking to hold us back. Now, in order to kind of lay out our first ability to work. So by the way, the reason that's so significant is because if we understand that the Nefesh Bahamas is not out to trap us, hold us back and whatever, we'll actually use the Nefesh Bahamas to fuel us for good. Okay, we'll actually use it in the right way because it comes from God and it's a part of what he put within us and it's there for a reason. So then the Alter Rebbe goes on to describe a mashal, and he quotes a Koheles. And in it, the Alter Rebbe describes there's a small city, and there's two kings, and each king wants control over the city. Well, where do you think that city is? That's us. That's inside. So when you feel like you're torn, there's a reason. There's two kings, and they're at it, and each one wants control. And what do they want control of? Well, your thoughts, your speech, your action. There is the inside of who I am, my Nefesh Bahamas, my Nefesh Elokis, the 10 spheres, and then there's the outside. What do I do about that? How do I express that in my thoughts, speech, and action? So I could feel, or I could think negative thoughts, or feel negatively. But what do I do about that? The insides and the outsides. And at any given moment, those two kings each want control. And they each want to at any given moment. So if you feel like you're constantly in conflict, well, that's because you are. It's not a mistake. It's not a mistake that you feel that way. It's not a mistake that you feel like every given moment I'm making tons of decisions, you know, and I'm being pulled in different directions and it feels really, really uncomfortable. Yep, because there's a battle inside. And there's those two kings, and each one doesn't want to get a little bit, a king doesn't want a little bit of control. Like, okay, fine, let's compromise. A king wants the kingdom, and you're the kingdom, you're the small city. But how do we navigate this? So then the Alter Rebbe moves on, and he shares with us how 3 different archetypes of humans navigate this. Now, we've heard these terms before, but really through the lens of Tanya, they're really described quite differently. And what's fascinating is that really an archetype, we think it's really like a conceptual identity. It's not an actual identity. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Really the classic tzaddik, rasha, and beinoni. And we started off by saying in the Alter Rebbe's, the opening page, we start off by saying that this is Sefer Shel Beinonim. So the Alter Rebbe is not going to spend as much time describing how the tzaddik handles it and the rasha handles it. This is all tools for the beinoni, right? But what are these 3 archetypes and how do they handle the internal battle? So we discussed briefly that the tzaddik, really there's 2 types of tzaddik, a tzaddik divided into 2 categories, tzaddikim, but it's divided into 2 categories, tzaddik v'tayl light, tzaddik v'ralai. And then we talked about that basically the tzaddik does not have a conflict. There's no conflict. And my son was like, how could it be there's no conflict? Like not even a little, like not even a second. And then we had a whole conversation. Then why did Hashem hold tzaddikim to higher standard? And then out came the stories from Navi, and out came the stories from here, but the tzaddik here was punished at Moshe Rabbeinu for hitting her. So it was a fascinating, obviously a fascinating conversation, as you can well imagine. But lo and behold, Baruch Hashem, I don't necessarily relate to the life of a tzaddik. What can I say? Very much not something I can relate to, not ever struggling to do what's right, or never having a disconnect between my insides and my outsides. How I need to express my thought, speech, and action, and what I'm thinking, feeling, and going through inside. And then we discussed the rasha, and the rasha really the rasha is struggling and doesn't succeed. The rasha is having that internal battle and then loses it. The rasha wants to take revenge and is struggling. Should he take revenge, or he or she take revenge? Then he takes revenge. And then comes our beinoni, which is our character of the Tanya, which is #life goals, right? If we have a life goal, it's like, can we get there? And really our beinoni on the outside looks like the tzaddik. Behavior aligned. And the inside looks like the rasha. So the struggle is internal, but the behavior, the lavush, the garment of thought, speech, and action is fully aligned with what Hashem wants, with its godly divine soul and mission. Okay? Now this is where it becomes interesting. There is a very incredible sicha. See, we tend to look at things very linear. You're either a tzaddik, or you're a rasha, or you're a beinoni. A, B, or C. 1, 2, or 3. There is a very famous sicha that the Rebbe spoke at Parshas Vayetze in 1989. So Tafshinun. And in it, the Rebbe actually takes this theory and makes it so multidimensional. Okay? It is a very fascinating sicha to learn in depth. If someone has extra time. But in this sicha, the Rebbe actually describes that really all 3 potentials of tzaddik, rasha, and beinoni are all within us at all times. So let me ask you a question. Anyone here ever, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good one. Did anyone here ever rob a bank? Anyone here ever rob a bank? No. Good. Okay. Did anyone here ever struggle and overcome the desire to rob a bank? Okay, first of all, if you robbed a bank, I need to be in touch with you. Keep me posted. Okay, fine. So fine. We relate. So in that area, I'm a tzaddik. I never robbed a bank. I don't plan on robbing a bank, right? I've never committed murder. I don't plan on committing murder. In that area, I'm fully a tzaddik. I didn't have the desire. And I not only did I not have the desire, but I did not do it. So at any given moment, we have all of these. Okay? We have all of these because there's 613 mitzvahs. And if you've never struggled with one of them and in behavior externally you've accomplished, pat yourself on the back, you had a tzaddik moment. Okay? Now, so it means, because usually when you start learning Tanya and you only learn about tzaddik, Rasha, Beinani, you're like depressed by the end. You're like, okay, great. I'm definitely not a tzaddik. You know, I didn't think I was a Rasha, but clearly, I mean, I don't always have control over my external behavior. My outsides don't always reflect my best self in thought, speech, and action. So, you know, I don't know. I guess I'm really, okay, maybe I can have a few more Beinani moments in life, like where like I struggle, but I still do what's right. Cool.
Sorry.
But really, what really we'll start to learn through this powerful sikha is that the way we look at these characters, the archetypes, the tzaddik, rasha, and beinani, these identities, we're really limiting ourselves. So it's a very fascinating thing, and I know it's not necessarily directly in Tanya, but it's a beautiful sikha that I learned off of Tanya, not off of Tanya, based on Tanya, and I felt like it has to be something we know about. Because even when we look at a child who's struggling in one area, doesn't mean they're struggling in all areas. If they seem like a monster in one area, let's look at the other areas. Let's build those up. Let's see how we can see the tzaddik in them in that area. You know, just because they're not maximizing their potential in one way, whether it's our spouse or our friend or our mother, our sister, our daughter-in-law, no, just because they're struggling in this area doesn't mean they can't shine in those. And you know what happens when you focus on the parts of a person that are shining, that are tzaddik-like? We all know what that looks like. That grows. And the rest settles down. So I think this is a really powerful reminder as we're introduced and we dig deep into who this tzaddik, rasha, and beinani are and how they relate to the world, to understand that at every given moment, you and I have those potential identities within. So not in looking at things just linear. And we know things are not, right? We know that human beings are way more complex than that and way more multidimensional than that and way more, right? Nuanced than that. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay? Moving on is the Alter Rebbe is going to give us really our first tool. And in it, and if you look at the handout, you feel free to look at it, but in it, the Alter Rebbe is basically going to explain to us that actually, in fact, contrary to pop psychology and contrary to all those out there who don't really understand this, that actually, Moshelet Alalev, that the mind can actually control the emotions. And this is really, talk about the idea of klipas nega being neutral and having potential to be elevated. And the Alter Rebbe will get into that a lot more in Tanya later on, a lot more extensively. That's a mind-boggling concept. Now comes this additional mind-boggling concept that, in fact, the mind can control the emotions. And the analogy I always show my students, I really struggle to digest and understand this idea, hold on, is I always literally draw a stick figure of a human. And I say, okay, where's the brain? And I make them someone come up and draw a brain. And where's the heart? And they do it. And then I draw a stick figure of a dog. Now, the only reason why I draw stick figures is because that's all I know how to draw, right? And I say, okay, where's the brain? Where's the heart? And they say, oh. I said, what do you see the difference? They said, well, in the animal, it's kind of much more aligned, like much closer together. In the human, yeah, the brain's really here. And I thought, yeah, it's not a mistake. It's not like just this random thing. If God wanted, our heart could be here and our brain could be here. I don't know. He made it that way for a reason. It's sending us a really powerful message. Your mind, your intellect can control your heart, your emotions. It's a reminder. It's not. Now, why am I sharing this? Is because we often feel that we often think our feelings are just the right thing. Someone hurt my feelings. I feel insulted. I feel hurt. I feel angry. I feel tired. I feel crazy. How I feel. Now, I'm not talking about physically, by the way. We give our feelings a lot of space. And I know 2021, pop psychologists, all these self-help books, lean into your feelings. And I'm not saying suppress your feelings, but I think the pendulum swung so far to the other side. Like there was like, okay, who cares? There are no feelings. Children have no feelings. Just suppress, keep moving forward, bury your feelings, bury your insecurities, your traumas, no. So because we went to that, from that extreme, went all the way to the other extreme that we all have to define ourselves by how I'm feeling. And I think that what we're learning, what Chassidus is teaching us is there is a balance. There's a better option. You don't want to just use your mind. There's a reason God gave you feelings. And sometimes, and we'll learn later, the Alter Rebbe actually talk about the term lean in. The Alter Rebbe will teach us that term later, not in that way. But the Alter Rebbe will tell us how to make space for negative feelings and understand them and channel them and use them appropriately. And that will come up in following classes. And it's incredible to think 150 years prior to Freud, the Alter Rebbe was giving us these tools as Yidden, as humans, as Chassidim. Tools that I mentioned last week, the entire world needs these tools. So what's that balance? We got to remember our mind can control the emotions. And I remember we were walking to Shul one day and a dog was barking and I had one child who's very scared of dogs and the other child who's not really scared of dogs. She kind of got caught up in the moment and she actually had gotten bitten by a dog and the dog was barking and she freaked out. She started to back up and I walked back with her and I said, "What's up?" I lost my cool there. I was all scared. And I said, what do you think we could do about that? Because I know that logically that's a neighbor's dog. It's a friendly dog. It's behind the fence. It's not the dog that bit you 3 years ago. So what's going on? Oh, I don't know. It was just a feeling and I couldn't control it. So now here as a parent, that's an incredible moment to give my child a glimpse into that tool. A glimpse into that tool the Chassidus gives them, because when we empower our children, just like we talked about last time, when we empower our child to understand that you feel a struggle within, that's because there is a struggle. So then they don't shame themselves. They don't, oh my goodness, there's something. No, you're made you're struggling. Baruch Hashem, you're a normal, healthy human being. You're exactly what Hashem made you. We talked about that last week, right? And if this week we can understand how we can give ourselves, the child within, and our own children, the tool to understand this is exactly what the Alter Rebbe said you are capable of. That's powerful. And actually, the way I did, and I said to her, I said, your mind can control your emotions. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, tell me about the dog. She said, well, it's safe and it's this and it's behind the fence and it's a nice dog and it's not the one that bit me. I said, great. So logically, it's not there. What happened was your emotions, fear or trauma, jumped up. And that was overriding, and therefore all your levushim, the way you were running and screaming and freaking. So the thought, the speech, the action, all of them was panic mode. And then I shared with her something. And I said, I want to tell you, because I also think this is a really powerful way to help those who we are connected with and close with really learn for themselves. I said, I want to tell you, when I was almost 6, I almost drowned. And I will never forget that feeling of being under the water and sinking, and the water and the gurgling and the panic and I just remember it. It was a very sharp, distinct moment. And I got out of the water, they pulled me out of the water. I pulled myself to the side. And from 6 until 25, I couldn't swim. Because I could never relax in water. And finally at 25, I was the mother of 3 and I said, I'm done with this. This is not going into the next 25 years of my life. And I told my husband, it's my birthday anniversary. I don't want jewelry. I don't want a vacation. I want swim lessons. And I hired a swim instructor. And for the entire summer, she taught me how to swim. From holding onto the wall, like your 6-year-olds learn or 5-year-olds learn, maybe in Texas, the 3-year-olds, literally, that's what I went through all summer. So I'm telling this to my child. My child's like, okay, that's a cool story, whatever. And then I said, but I want to tell you, I want to follow up with that story. So from 25 until, now I'm a little older than 25, I've been swimming and I'm fine. I said, but you know what happened a few years back, about four years back, I went on a trip and there was this incredible watering hole, like a large cave in the water. And you took a zip line and you plunked into it. I was the only one there in a full dress and a sheitel. I think I actually had my sheitel on, my short little sheitel, and I'm flying down the zip line. And as I'm flying down the zip line and I'm about to let go, and I let go. Now, how much time is there between letting go from the zip line to landing in the water? 3 seconds? I don't know. I'm not a mathematician and I don't know distance and speed and all of that. It was quick. During that time, the feelings from when I was 6 of panic started rising to the surface. And then I had to override it with my mind, with my intellect. You know how to swim. You're fine. You're not gonna drown. I had to override that feeling. And I told this to my child, and my child said, whoa, that's what my Lev means. Now I would say a silly example, because it's not day to day. We have a lot of feelings that are gonna rise to the surface, and they're not easy. Maybe we were hurt. Maybe there's a bad, unhealthy pattern. Maybe we feel really like a victim. Maybe we're angry. Maybe there's a lot of feelings that rise to the surface, but we actually have power to override them. And it doesn't mean it's easy. It requires work. And it requires being involved. But this tool, I think if we can give it to ourselves, practice it in a real way, and help our children see that tool as a real tool, it's the biggest gift we can give them. Because then we go beyond default mode, beyond the Nefesh Bahama steering the ship. Then we are more in control, and we have the ability to do this. And this tool, I think, is one of the most incredible things of Chassidus. And we know there's a very famous story of Moshe Meisels, who Napoleon came in and put his hand on his heart, and he said he's going to, catch who the spy is. And he put his hand on his heart, and he actually was a spy, and he stayed calm. And someone said, later on, the Chassidim want to know, how did you have that presence of mind and calm? And he said, because I learned by the Alter Rebbe, Meir Shal Lev. So it's something that's a story maybe you've heard, maybe when you're introduced to Chabad Chassidus, but the whole novelty of this idea. In 2020, the world hasn't figured that out yet. They haven't. 2021. Sorry, we're in a new year, right? The world hasn't figured it out yet. They're still struggling. Too much emotions, not enough emotions, overwhelming emotions, just emotions. Well, what happens if we just let people? Then we have snowflakes. I mean, we're struggling. We're struggling with the kids, with the school participation words. Can't use a red pen anymore because we're overdone the emotions. We forgot that there's logic. We as Chassidim have balance. And we have to understand that at the end of the day, these tools that each class we can hopefully pull up and walk through life with are really meant to be practical, real, relevant, and help transform us in a very real way. So I'm going to, last class, I promised to give enough time for questions and discussion. But what I really want to open up the floor to is A, any questions, but B, really a discussion on how do we do this for ourselves? How can we model this? How can we do this to the way we look at the people around us? How do we do this practically? It's really easy and theoretical to say, and it's not so easy to do. And while she was freaking out with the dog, I didn't tell her, I didn't scream at her with that. But afterwards, we were processing, and I was empowering her to understand she has that kayach within. She has that power. Hashem gave it to her. It's a tool she has. So any thoughts, any questions, please, I could keep going, but I also know that last time we really did not give enough time for that. So does anyone have any thoughts, ideas, questions they want to jump in for? Are we going to all be shy? Come on, guys. It's nice if we don't know each other.
So Manya,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. Are we going to be learning, like you said, that we all have the potential and the ability to control our emotions with our intellect, but are we going to be learning like how?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. You got to come back for the next class. No, we leave it this cliffhanger. No, the Alter Rebbe really is going to go through a very large series, and it's a fascinating, journey, because really without understanding the workings of the Nefesh HaBahamis and Nefesh Elokis, and without making space in them, without understanding how they work, and without understanding the struggle, without understanding that we have the tools to override this, then we won't be ready for the tools. And so really, if you look at it as we said in the beginning, the Alter Rebbe was really giving guidance or coaching sessions, right? He said, to all those who know me well, to all those who came and poured out their heart with all their issues and all their troubles and all their struggles, I'm writing this down for you. I looked into the souls of those who I am connected with, and here are the solutions. So it is pretty strategic. And the fact that we're going to accomplish most of these, get through the majority of the tools in 8 weeks is, I think, borderline miraculous. It's yes, glossing over. I mean, there were beautiful parts that we just skipped about the power of the Beinoni with Tefillah, and we're not skipping them because they're not important, but we're really trying to extract the most powerful toolbox. And then hopefully once we have those tools, we're going to really want to dig deep into Tanya and maybe set up chavrussas or learn chitas. And there's so many opportunities to keep learning. So yes, the answer is yes. It's just, it builds up. So any thoughts, any ways we could do this in a real way for ourselves or those around us? I never saw this crowd so quiet. I'm going to unmute you all, Any questions? Look how.
Okay, well, if no one's going to ask, I'll ask another question.
Go for it. I really do appreciate it.
So you were talking before about the internal struggle that we all have, because we're all a city and the two kings are trying to conquer us, and the struggle is, so it's very easy to think of your thoughts as being your internal, but the Tanya describes as our thoughts as our levush.
Okay.
So where is this internal struggle taking place if not in our thoughts?
Okay.
And then, okay, yeah.
No. Great question. And actually, I just looked at the chats because I didn't realize there were some private chats sent to me. And so one was actually about this. Well, if it's not, what does that mean? Levush of thoughts. It's so easy to understand how my actions are a levush or my speech is a levush, right? I could say, I remember I gave that example when, everyone showed up at my door Erev Shabbos and I was covered in, and flour and a tichel and a shmata, and I thought one thing inside and I felt one thing inside, but outside came wow, welcome to Chabad. So nice to meet you, right? My levush at that time wasn't get out of here, next time call, be a mensch. I wouldn't show up at your house. That's not what came out of my mouth, right? So at that given moment, I was able to really quickly alter. So I think that really also a little bit later on the altar, I was going to zoom in on the machshava, the levush of machshava, but the struggle, meaning the struggle is internal over every single moment because the Nefesh HaBahamis wants to control your action. So you're struggling internally with your feelings and your thoughts. The levush of machshava, and again, we're gonna, next week it comes up more in depth, and I'm happy to put the text into the handout. If the handouts don't work, or if people want to use the handouts during class, whatever it is, give me feedback because I'm happy to tweak and adapt. And this is for you guys. And so it's whatever works for everybody here, as a collective group. I'm happy to do that. So the struggle that we have is internal, and where we express a levush, meaning we're choosing to put on a garment. So I could struggle internally with a thought. Shouldn't I? That's a struggle. Then when I choose to ponder and plan and think, and I think as women, we're really good at letting our minds take us on this fascinating journey of our brains grow, the story grows, the story has children and grandchildren, by time, and that's where it becomes a levush. The example I gave was once, you're driving to a job and someone in a red car, cuts you off, and you think, oh, that whatever in a red car, that's a second, it's an action, it's a flash, you think it. But then you're reminding that red car actually reminds you of the kid in high school who drove a red car, who bullied you, who was so mean to you, and the story's growing in your head, right? And by time you arrive at your destination. You're stressed out, you're anxious, you're a mess, you're not relaxed. That's the struggle was, oh my goodness, that red car, what kind of driver? That's okay. Choosing to develop, think, go through, fuel the negativity from that thought, that's the lavush of machshava. So meaning it's all happening inside. Even the lavush of machshava is internal. Even the lavush of machshava happens inside, but it's still a choice what I'm doing with it. Does that make sense? You ever saw one of your children or someone you love, a student, get caught up and they can't let go? They just can't let go. They can't let go. They're stuck in it. They can't let go. I see that I have certain children that they struggle with it more. Something bothers them. Someone did something to them. Some kids could say, oh, that happened. That was upsetting. Maybe I'll get that person back. Then they're like, no, I won't. And then they move forward. And then you have the other one who's plotting a whole revenge with a map and it's different personalities. And so, yes, that's where the conscious choice. Hold on a second. I see a good question. Okay, can you get on mic and explain your question? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, I think what the question that Elisa was asking was, how could it be that it's a lavush and to be internal? But I think that what you were saying was that when it's developed and we're thinking about it and we're actually anxious about it, then it becomes the external lavush.
Correct.
Okay.
Meaning a fleeting thought of, I'm so mad at that person, not a lavush.
Right.
Yeah, but when you spend a half hour planning how you're going to get them back or how mad you are and how they always ruin your life and how your day is horrible and whatever, and you go down that rabbit hole sometimes we go down? Yeah, that's a lavush. That's the lavush. And you get stuck in it. And then what does it do? And then we're going a little bit ahead in Tanya. What does it do? It holds you back. It makes you feel bad about yourself, about others, about life, about the world, and then the pity party starts. Then you're the only one who shows up at the pity party. Then you're sad that you're the only one at the pity party. We all know how that happens. So that rabbit hole where you get stuck, that's a lavush.
Right. It just sounded like it was unclear because you said it was an internal.
Well, it's internal because it's you. I mean, I don't know about you, but my brain's not on the outside of my body.
You meant in that way. Okay.
Yeah. Meaning it's happening inside of you, like legit, this is a science thing. This is just an anatomy thing, right? Though there are people that wear their emotions on their sleeve. You look at them and you can know exactly what they're thinking and they're feeling, that's true too. But I hope that clarifies. And it's very interesting. This is a very common misconception about the lavush of machshava. It's a very, because you could just say, oh, lavush, machshava dibur ma'isa, thought, speech, and action. But what does that mean? How does that play out? But I think many of us can relate to allowing a thought to take up a little too much space in our mind, a negative thought. But we can also allow positive thoughts to take on a lot of space in our mind. And again, that's a choice. Any other questions?
So Manya.
Yeah.
Related question. So when it comes to modern psychology and they talk about all these subconscious thoughts that are driving certain emotions, and we have certain emotions and we don't even know
where they're coming from.
Thought process is leading to that emotion, and until we backtrack to that, we can't really heal whatever the emotional reaction that's happening. So how does that fit into this?
Okay,
conscious
that's amazing.
Hard to recognize.
Amazing. Yeah, Al, great question. And I will tell you that in depth later on, we're going to deal with this because the Alter Rebbe is going to look at it with atzvos and mariros. The Alter Rebbe is going to look at it with guilt and shame and that negative cycle and how to get out of that space. And the Alter Rebbe is going to actually give us a really practical tool because 100%, if we have a feeling that keeps cropping up, okay, if every time I saw water, I had an inner panic, well, it's coming from somewhere. If I don't address where that's coming from, then it's going to keep happening, right? And I always tell my students, I said, if you're struggling in the same way again and again and again, that's exactly where you need to take a look at, right? But really the truth is that the Alter Rebbe does later on deal with how to create space for that and how to know whether that negative feeling that you're having that's coming to the surface, that's going to drive negative behavior, or even if it's not negative, but behavior that's not positive, even if it's kind of neutral, but it's just not going to advance you and help you maximize your potential, the Alter Rebbe is going to actually describe how that's really ultimately to hold you back and how to carve out time and space for it. But that's in class, I don't know, 3 or 4, I'm not sure. Sorry, but I hope that gives you kind of a mindset, right? Like it definitely, you know, that's what's so amazing is that the tools that the Algebra gave us are like, they're like so practical and real and relevant. Like I feel like so much of the things that I see people struggling with, like if they just learned Tanya, like, there's so much there. And I said this before, Tanya's not going to substitute for medication and Tanya's not going to substitute for therapy. But really, when you take these tools and you bring them into your life and you're aware, it really empowers you and go along with, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. Tanya is wonderful to go along that journey. So I hope that we covered some interesting ideas, and clearly what we can see at least is that there is so much more to uncover and so much more to learn and so much more to unpack together. And I really want to thank you for entrusting me with an hour of your week. It's really, really a treat. I don't take that privilege lightly. And I hope everyone enjoyed. I really enjoyed learning together. So also, if anyone has any feedback or questions, feel free. You can voice note me. You can drop me a WhatsApp, and I'm happy to follow up with anything if there's something that didn't click or resonate. I'm really not so good at checking chats while things are going on because I get like too distracted. Okay, ladies, have a wonderful, wonderful night. Feel free to jump on and feel free to message me if there's anything to follow up with. Or there's something I missed. That's always possible. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.